Welcome to the Sheckler Spotlight, where creativity meets purpose and conversation goes deeper. Join host Harrison Sheckler as he sits down with inspiring guests from all walks of life, artists, thinkers, musicians, and everyday heroes, to explore the stories that shape us, uplift us, and connect us. Now here's your host, Harrison Sheckler.
Hi, I'm your host, Harrison Sheckler, and today on the Sheckler Spotlight, I'm thrilled to sit down with one of the world's leading voices in positive psychology and personal fulfillment. Robert Mack is an Ivy League educated positive psychology expert, a celebrity happiness coach, a best-selling author, and a renowned television host and producer. You've seen his work on Good Morning America, The Today Show, and Access Hollywood, and read his insights in GQ, Cosmopolitan, and Glamour. He served as the celebrity love coach on E! Network's Famously Single and brought his expertise to the OWN network and Good Morning LaLa Land. His books, Happiness from the Inside Out and Love from the Inside Out, have transformed lives around the world and have even earned endorsements from icons like Oprah and Vanessa Williams. Today, we'll explore the art and science of happiness, self-love, and creating more fulfilling relationships, both with others and with ourselves. The spotlight is now on you, Robert Mack. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I am super excited to dive into your background and just learn about all the great things that you're doing. I'd like to start, this is how I start with all my guests, is the origin story. So I'd like to know, how did you start? Like, what kind of kid were you growing up? And how did it lead you onto this pursuit of happiness?
Yeah, boy, great question. I was a very curious and very quiet, but very discontent little kid. Uh, Lots of questions, most of which went unanswered. I had two loving, wonderful parents, a lot of stress growing up, I think like so many households. I was very unhappy and very anxious for a long period of time.
Mm.
And I always assumed or thought that I would grow out of that, that if I became the professional basketball player like I wanted, and I finally maybe had a girlfriend, maybe had some friends, maybe made some money, that I would finally earn the happiness and fulfillment that I always thought was possible to earn through achievement and accomplishment and acquisition. Of course, that didn't happen. As I got older, I just became more and more discontent, more and more depressed, and even suicidal, despite
Mm.
doing well athletically and academically, and even socially and relationally to a large extent. And I got to a place where I decided I was going to take my own life. I was going to commit suicide. So I began to research the means and methods to do so, and I decided I was going to slash my wrist. So one day I went into the kitchen and I got a steak knife and I rammed it into my wrist. I still have the suicide test marks on my wrist to this day. What's fascinating about that moment is that when I dug that knife into my wrist, without anything in my external life changing, I mean, for the most part, objectively, I had a good life. At that point, I had a good job. I had a great girlfriend. I had friends. I had money and that health, the things that you think would protect you from an unhappy, certainly a suicidal experience like this. Despite having all those things, I felt so deeply dissatisfied, dug the knife into my wrist, and without any real understanding of what was happening, I felt the kind of peace and love and joy in that moment that you expect never to feel in a moment like that you would only expect to feel if you fell in love or if you hit the lottery or so I felt this real deep sense of contentment. And so in that moment I put off doing anything more. I, put the knife aside and I stepped back and I said, I'll, take 5 or 10 minutes. And if I still feel suicidal in 5 or 10 minutes or longer, I can always, kill myself. But I began doing a different kind of research. I began looking into like what is depression? What is unhappiness? What is happiness? And boy, I was blown away by what I discovered. I discovered so much in that period of time. So that's really what my childhood was like. It was full of lots of fun. I mean, I played lots of sports. but a ton of stress and anxiety and a whole lot of suicidal ideation.
Wow. That's really heavy. And
Yes.
I don't know if I can compare any other, any other stories of someone when they're in that really dark moment of feeling peace. That's a first that I've heard. And so, okay, so you feel this peace
Yeah.
and it kind of jump starts like rewiring the mind of like, okay, maybe I want to start focusing on the positive aspects,
That's
right?
right.
So
Like,
yeah,
uh,
dive into that. I'm
yeah,
kind of
it's such a
curious.
great tip. At that point, lots of people had told me, just be positive. I hadn't shared how depressed or unhappy I was with anybody really. I would sometimes test the water by saying something very morbid, like a dark joke. We're
Sure.
all going to die anyway, kind of thing. And, people who normally didn't take the bait. I was a pretty serious kid anyway, so they probably suspected maybe this kid's already a little dark. Let's not entertain that too much. But it was my way of trying to see if anybody was open to the conversation. And really, people weren't, and I understand why. And so, they would occasionally say things like, "Oh, just be positive." And I knew that was something that you should probably do is be positive and be grateful. But I tried so hard. I couldn't find the positive aspects of things and the silver linings and things quite so easily. And I felt very grateful on one level for my life, but I felt even more guilty for not feeling more grateful enough to not be suicidal. So it's like layers and layers of sort of judgment and self-judgment and suffering around that. So, but when I had the experience, and it's taken me quite a long time to understand something so simple, when I had the experience, what I discovered was after many years is that finally, for a moment or a micro moment, my mind was quiet. I hadn't experienced a quiet mind as a kid very much. It was just running nonstop about everything and anything. And in that quiet, was contentment, and in that contentment was peace and love and even self-love. There was no real thought about it. And, as I went further in trying to understand the experience, I discovered that, as I began to contemplate the end of my life, I was also really after the end of my problems. And when you come to the end of the contemplation of your problems, well, you come to the end of contemplation in general for the most part. Most of the mind, as beautiful as it is built for survival, not necessarily happiness. And it does a phenomenal job of looking out for you. So, like the century of a ship, it's looking for problems to solve to keep you alive. Now, that software is a little outdated. It's based on, sort of caveman, cavewoman, primitive days when we were running away from bears or trying to, hide from, a winter that was coming. So, uh, as my mind got quiet for a few moments, I felt the kind of peace and happiness that I'd always hoped to achieve through sports, academics, friends, and relationships.
So you've kind of set out this career to recreate that process, right?
Yeah.
And so through your research, well, I guess first I would like to preface, what does happiness mean to you in Robert
Yeah,
Mack's own words?
that's a great question because it's evolved over time. Happiness is the peaceful aliveness, it's the felt oneness with the life within you. So that unfiltered, uncensored, unedited, thoughtless, wordless experience of the peaceful aliveness that's always within you is what I'd call happiness. It's
Mhm.
not something that comes and goes with conditions or circumstances or people. It's not something that's here for a few moments and then, gone again because you're not participating in a particular activity. It's something that's always there underneath every single experience, sensation, perception, thought, word, action, condition, and circumstance. It's always there. It's something that we feel into or tap into consciously and therefore call happiness. And sometimes what we forget or don't think we know how to tap into and therefore call unhappiness, right? So it's this sort of pool of well-being or contentment that exists within all of us. You can kind of think of it like a quality, like kindness or honesty, something that's always there within you. And sometimes we're more intentional and conscious about feeling it, and
Mhm.
sometimes we're distracted by the world and our experiences.
So when we're trying to recall happiness per se, are is it like you're building up a muscle of happiness? Is that how you would define it? I'm curious, like
So,
in your
yes.
research, like what did you find? Like, one, you just defined what happiness is to you, but what's the correlation of maybe our thought processes
Yeah.
and how we can implement that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great call. So, um, and this is the reason I wrote the first book, Happiness from the Inside Out,
Hmm.
because I, quite frankly, wasn't ready to write more books that were about where we're starting now. We're sort of starting at the end, so sorry to spoil the ending for everyone, but a quiet mind is really where it's at. That being said, in the beginning, the key is to focus on things that feel good when you focus on them. Very simple. If you're in heaven or utopia and
Hmm.
there's a pothole there, and all you do is stare at the pothole all day, your heavenly experience will become hellish very quickly. Right? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the same way, if you're in hell and you happen to be under the one cool spring in hell, it's going to feel pretty heavenly to you. So the idea is that life is full of pros and cons and advantages and disadvantages, things you like and things you don't like. If and when you can, and you always can, focus on that which feels better to you when you focus on it. So at first, we start on the outside. We say, let's fill our lives up with as many things, activities, and people and places as we possibly can or can afford.
Hmm.
Make us feel good, right? That's the name of the game. It's like, okay, if you don't have to sleep on a bed of nails, please don't. So we start there, right? We call those happiness activities. We do the same thing with people. If there are toxic people in your life or toxic activities or environments, we try to eliminate those things. Not always possible because you can't clean the world up, to be perfect in the way that you want, but you try. And then so that you do happy people and happy activities, and then you move on and you just try to think happy thoughts. So at some point in your journey, at first it's all about this is why most people are it's all about success and money,
Mm-hmm.
wealth. They're trying to create a world for themselves where despite where they look or what they think about, it feels good to them, right? But you realize after doing that for a while, it doesn't work very well because no person, place, or activity, condition, or circumstance is ever perfect. That's why you've got songs like More Money, More Problems, right? That's why rich people are often just as unhappy, if not more unhappy, than poor people, right? That's why famous people are just as suicidal, often more so than, people who are not well known at all. So that's the first step. The second step is then you realize, well, it's not about success and money. Yeah, we'll take as much of that as we can possibly have, but it's about relationships and connection. That's true. And that's where the science of positive psychology comes in very handy. That research says over and over again, the happiest people really have high quality relationships. They may not have a ton, but they really focus there. But that's only still half baked because you can have people in your life that you love very much that get on your nerves, drive you nuts. You want to change them. They have addictions. They get sick, right? Things happen to them, and that can be extraordinarily unhappy. So then you realize, well, it's got to be more than that. And that's where you go graduate to the place where you're like, it's not just about success and money. It's not even just about people and relationships. It's also about what I think and how I think. As Marcus Aurelius says, happiness is largely about the quality of your thoughts. So that's where you begin to realize I need to focus, no matter where I am or who I'm with, on the best in this person, place, or thing. Okay. Now, at some point, you realize that even that doesn't quite get it because it's certainly much more helpful to think positive thoughts than is negative thoughts. No questions about that. Okay. And it doesn't have to be a snowdrop, by the way. It's about telling a truthful, better feeling story. So if it's raining outside, you don't need to say it's sunny. All you have to really say is the rain reminds me of how much I love the sunshine. I'm really looking forward to the sunshine. That kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rain makes me feel better about staying inside all day and sleeping or watching Netflix, whatever it is, right? So, but at some point, at least in my journey, you discover that despite all that positive thinking, which is helpful, there's still an undercurrent of anxiety, of worry. Even with gratitude, you start to look at your life and you say, oh my gosh, I'm healthy, or I'm young, or I'm beautiful, or I'm smart, or I've got a great job. And you then begin to worry about losing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
right? You see, everything has its curse. Every blessing comes with a curse is kind of the feeling. It's
Yes.
this duality. And Buddha said it well. He said, there are sort of only two kinds of happiness in the or only two kinds of unhappiness in the world. It's not getting what you want, and it's getting what you want. Because when you get what you want, you're not losing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, you graduate even from the idea that happiness is mostly or exclusively about positive thinking. Keep thinking positively, but also recognize how beautiful and blissful and how much a blessing and benediction is to not think at all, to just sit. And when you're sitting, just enjoy sitting. When you're breathing, just enjoy breathing. When you're walking, just enjoy walking. You're making love, just enjoy making. You don't need to think and plot and plan and script and worry about everything and everybody all the time. And in that recognition, you experience the kind of peace that passes understanding, the happiness that passes understanding. It's what I call the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, right? It's Albert Camus's Invincible Summer Within. It's that peaceful aliveness that persists through all conditions, circumstances, places, people, sensations, and perceptions. It's always there.
So now I'm curious when you've realized this and you've come full circle of realizing that it is within our wheelhouse to pursue happiness, and it's just the perspective of like reframing our outlook on our daily life and what occurs in it. When you're trying to tell, like, let's say really motivated people, like let's say someone on Wall Street who's just like working like crazy and they're a workaholic and working crazy hours, but that's what they feel fulfillment in. How do you convince them, be like, hey, you can be happy, you don't have to have all this anxiety? I mean,
Oh,
everyone's case is different, but how does Robert go convince these people that yes, you can be happy and not have to be all stressed and stuff?
Oh, Harrison, you ask phenomenal questions. Listen, I've been doing this work for 20 years and I've done a lot of interviews and had a lot of conversations. You ask really fantastic questions. You can feel how heartfelt they are. And I appreciate that.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. I appreciate that too.
Yeah, truly. That's a great question. So number one, so one, I discovered early in my practice, um, been disabused of the idea that it's my job to convince anybody of anything. I
Mm-hmm.
realized people should think what they think and they should do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to anyway. They're going to anyway.
That's true. That's very true.
Also, the other piece of this is confirmation bias, which does play a role in, happiness. And you want to be careful about trying to convince people through logic and reason. It generally doesn't work. It backfires, right? We know that
Mm-hmm.
confirmation bias and negativity bias work together to get us uh, create a lot of problems between us and other people, even when we're well-intentioned, right? So to your first point, I try not to convince. That being said, that doesn't mean that I don't try to influence and I don't try to support in
Mm-hmm.
ways that are best for them. So the one thing I've discovered is that people who are used to sprinting their whole lives out of fear, frustration, or desperation, instead of enjoying their lives and pursuing their goals and their dreams out of inspiration, they're usually exhausted and they're usually they usually are frustrated. There's some pain point they have, and so we talk about that. Is it the stress, the anxiety? Maybe it's the lack of time and energy. Maybe it's the disconnection they feel, the loneliness they feel. There's a lot of things that people experience who are very successful and wealthy, and most of them will admit they'd love if they could experience that success and that kind of wealth and abundance without the stress and anxiety and the hurry and worry that they're so accustomed to. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing. So then we talk about the difference between clean energy and dirty energy. You can run your life from dirty energy and just pollute your body and your relationships and the rest of the world with this dirty energy, or you can run it clean. You can run it in a way that doesn't pollute everything and everyone around you. And how much not only more efficient that is, but how much more enjoyable that is for everyone, for everyone. And then we go further, and this is usually what really hooks them, is we talk about not just the causes of happiness, but the effects of happiness. So in other words, happiness isn't only the greatest success and the greatest wealth and the greatest health and the greatest beauty, it also leads to those things. right? So decades of Ivy League research has found that happy people live 6 to 7 years, as many as 11 or more years longer than unhappy people.
Hmm.
They are healthier while they live longer. They make more money than their unhappy counterparts, about 600 to $700,000 on average over the course of their entire lifetime. That's something you can do something with, 600 to $700,000. They get married earlier, stay married longer, and are happier at all the relationships, whether they're married or not. It's about happiness and love, not just being married or not. Uh, they are rated as more attractive. Physically, they're rated as more attractive because a Duchenne smile, which is a smile that activates about 300 muscles in your face, can't be faked. And people,
Mm.
feel it. They know that, even if they don't know the theory behind it, and they don't know anything about the musculature, they do feel it. In fact, when people give you fake smiles, it causes small little microscopic tears in your heart, right? So that's why it's not good to be around people who are fake with you or fake happiness. Uh, you know, they also are more charitable and kind. Happy people donate more time, energy, and even blood to individuals and causes that matter to them. So in all ways, happiness increases the effortless success in your life, both personally and professionally, both platonically and romantically, financially, in every way. That hook really gets them because then they think, oh, there is something to this clean energy thing. I can improve my life without the stress and strain and the struggle and strife that I'm so used to.
So, are there people, like prime examples that we might know of who you would consider are these happy people?
Yeah, I'd say, the interesting thing is, and I would never have imagined 20 years ago that I would say this was the case. In fact, I'd be sure that it was just a crazy, far-fetched lie. I'm one of those people,
Hmm.
which is mind-blowing to me, meaning that I don't consider myself a special or extraordinary in any way except for one, which is that I love feeling good. I
Yeah.
love feeling good, right? In fact, I loved it so much that I was willing to sacrifice my life for it.
Hmm.
And so the happiest people generally are people who have, not generally, without question, they have prioritized happiness above everything else. And often, not always, but lots of these people end up being people who write and talk about. And you can feel it viscerally when you're in their presence. So, an Eckhart Tolle, for example, I mean, if you've ever been in the presence of that guy, immediately you feel more relaxed. You feel like everything's okay. Rupert Spear is like that. Esther Hicks is like that, right? I have books that write Abraham Hicks books. Robert Holden. I never got a chance to meet Richard Carlson, but his wife, Christine Carlson, you feel that. So, oh gosh, Neil Donald Walsh. And you'd feel it with these people who have generally really done the work. So I'd say most of the now they're also by the way, and it's hard to compete with these living beings, animals and small children. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason your dog and your cat and your bird and your hamster are happier than you and your baby, right? Because they don't ruminate. They don't
No,
spend most of their lives thinking about life. They spend it living, loving, and enjoying life.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So I have two yellow Labradors, and they are like the happiest things on the planet. They can get sad, and when you scold them or whatnot, and it's like, no, you can't have the 10th treat today. But they they like brighten your day, and it's contagious. See, that's the thing. Like you're talking about these people who are exuding happiness, and for yourself. So we're talking, across the country over Zoom right now. But there is, even through the screen, I can see a certain presence that you are exuding and
Mm.
showing, and it's really interesting. And how, maybe what are some steps that people can take that, like, they're having a hard time, like, let's say at work, interacting with their boss or something, and they want to create a genuine, but a certain, what's the word, well, just presence around them that is going to be conducive to, I guess, like a more positive, um losing my words right now, sorry.
Yeah, it's
But
a
like
positive
just a
experience.
positive experience.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So like what are some key things that they maybe can test out?
Um, I'm going to answer that. And first, to tee it up, thank you for such kind, generous, supporting, encouraging words. Harrison, like that means the world to me. I mean, I was suicidal, right? So for to hear that from you, huge encouragement. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Also, it's a mirror. You're a mirror. So I feel that back from you, right? Like there's a certain presence and an energy that is unmistakable. Um, and emotional contagion, emotion is the most contagious element on the planet. You can pass it through a screen, through a picture, through one simple word or an expression, all the way across the world to someone you've never even met before. And we do that, by the way, all the time. That's, um, in terms of sort of embodying sort of a more sort of deeper, more peaceful in life presence, one that can transform relationships and environments without even saying a whole lot. The first step is to want it above all else. You have to want peace or peaceful aliveness or happiness. You have to want that and prioritize it above everything and everyone else in your life. It has to be that important to you. The same way that, a drowning person wants air, you kind of have to want it. And it
Mm,
usually takes a lot of either suffering or intelligence to really want it, to just come to the recognition that everything and everybody else that you want, you only want for one reason, and that is because you think that by having those things or those people, you're going to feel better. I call that better feeling, happiness or peace, contentment, fulfillment. Um, so number one is to want it and to want it sort of exclusively.
hmm
It helps if you know that by getting it, you'll get everything else. So you get the inside right, and the outside will fall in place, kind of idea, right? As below, as above, so below, as within, so without. If you kind of have that belief, it lets you relax a little, and you don't have to feel like by being deeply peaceful and present, I'm going to be taken advantage of. I'm going to
hmm
be giving my power away. No, just the opposite. Okay. Number three, start where it's easy. Okay. Don't start with your mother or father-in-law. Don't start, right, with the stepkids or whatever. Don't start with your terrible boss. Start where it's easy. So practice feeling into the peaceful aliveness in your body at home, when you're going for a walk, when you're with friends. And you don't even need to do it so directly. Just identify four things: happiness islands, activities you love for their own sake; happiness deserts, things you do not love for their own sake. You hate them. Okay. Success islands, things that you do very easily and effortlessly well. And then success deserts, things that you don't do easily and effortlessly well. They probably suck at them. You want to get the deserts off your plate as much as possible. You can do that in seven ways. You can reduce or eliminate. So just stop doing them, do less of them. Outsource or delegate, automate or regulate or innovate. So that you can focus on the overlapping islands, but particularly the happiness islands. Okay.
hmm
So that's how you begin to practice like this vibration, sort of this feeling. Okay. But then as you continue, you'll find that as you spend more and more time just practicing happiness, feeling into the happiness that's already there, and those activities and people sometimes make it easier to feel into it, you get better and better at it. And you therefore rewire your brain accordingly. Then the brain is plastic, right? This is what the science of neuroplasticity is all about. When you think a thought over and over again, especially with a little bit of emotion, it becomes hardwired into your brain and it becomes hard to not think that thought. This is why so many of us are unhappy or stressed or anxious. It's hard to change ourselves. But when you practice long enough, about 22 to 66 days, if you do it consistently, you rewire your brain to experience life in a much more peaceful and happy way. One simple practice or way to do that, above the exercises I just mentioned, is a micro meditation. A micro meditation is just a one breath vacation from life and from everybody and everything in life. The word meditation is kind of unfortunate, it feels painful. It's not. The idea is remember, ideally, you and I, Harrison, and the whole world, we have 100 years left in these beautiful human flesh costumes kind of thing. But also, who knows, maybe 1 minute, maybe 30 seconds. You never know. And so you want to take life very sincerely, not seriously, but very sincerely that way. And so you say, I don't want to postpone my happiness any longer. I'm not going to procrastinate on this peace thing and this happiness thing. I'm going to enjoy right now, even if right now kind of sucks. Especially going to enjoy it, right? If I can't control the things around me, it's that much more important to control the one thing within me. So then what you do is you let all your thoughts go and you try to enjoy your breath ideally through your nose and from the stomach, as deeply as possible, just to feel good, just for the pleasure of it, not to get good at it, not to be spiritual, not to be, holier than thou. The idea is simply, just going to enjoy that breath as deeply as possible without thinking. If you just did that as often as you remember throughout the day, that would transform your life in a way that almost nothing else could. It sounds so small and so paltry, but try not to underestimate its value, based on its simplicity.
It's interesting. And we all breathe. And so we all have the capability of trying that. And I'm going to try it. I will try to implement that in my daily life. Just focused breathing, but also not thinking about everything else, right? Just,
Boom.
yeah.
And you can do it not only with breathing, try to do it with everything. So that's the next tip is not only start where it's easy, but also practice everywhere with everything and with everyone. So in other words, when you're folding the clothes, unitask, do one thing at a time. So when you're folding the clothes, just fold the clothes. Don't also think. So remember, thinking is one thing. When you're taking a shower, just enjoy the shower, be in your body. Try not to think. When you're eating, just eat. Don't think. And when you're thinking, just think. Or you're worrying, just worry. You want to worry? Just sit there and worry for 30 minutes straight and see how hard it is. You get to,
Yeah.
you get 15, 20 minutes in, and then you find your mind wandering things. Oh, I wouldn't mind a hamburger. I wouldn't. No, no, we're gonna worry right now, I thought.
No, that's so true. That is so
Yeah.
true. And so, okay, so my background, I am, I have a doctorate in piano performance. I'm in the arts, I'm a college professor, and it's very disciplined field. So, like, if you want to become a very accomplished concert pianist, you have to be very focused at what you do. So, when we were preparing, like, I went to the Cincinnati Conservatory for undergrad, and we were preparing for a bunch of competitions, and it was average like minimum 6 hours a day of practicing. Yeah, like minimum 6 to 8 hours. So I mean that's your whole day, and then you might have a few classes here and there. But we really loved it. It was passionate, but there was also people who got burnt out and they couldn't stay focused. And it just makes me wonder with like people who have really high or who are really high achievers, go-getters, and from my experience, the arts, that if they implemented these small little practices, something as simple as breathing, is if maybe it would kind of rejuvenate them during the day, or they'd be able to keep going, or they would appreciate the process. And I think it's a good thing to pair to, because I always tell people that even when we have difficult situations in life or we receive resistance, this has kind of been a common trend in my podcast lately that I'm seeing with my guests, but it's embracing resistance, because in resistance, that's where we learn and grow. Those are those growth opportunities. But and that's a perspective. Some people are met with resistance and they're like, I give up. I just can't do it. But if we train ourselves to, when we come to something that is this resistance or hardship, the frame process, trying to really hardwire our brain to, like, with the positive thoughts, which is difficult to do, and it's something you have to work on. But maybe the beginning of that, and then when you get through that, like that hump, or that over that really hard, difficult situation, you're going to be more resilient in the end.
Oh, Harrison, very insightful and very poignant. Um, I'm not at all surprised that you're a concert pianist. I mean, it's mind-blowing to me the discipline that folks have and the multi talented individuals that exist in the world, and you're a good example of that. You nailed it. Look, straight roads don't make skillful drivers. Smooth
Mm,
seas don't make skillful sailors, right? It's the wind and the resistance that flies a plane. Literally, without that,
hmm.
without the resistance there, the plane doesn't fly. So it's the contrast of life that makes it so beautiful and challenging and also fun and rewarding,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
So that's what flow state ultimately is. So the science of flow state, Mike Cheek sent me a high, a mentor of mine, and just a phenomenal man, unfortunately, passed not too long ago, but he wrote a great book about flow, and he was really the godfather, the grandfather of flow state theory. And flow state is really about the challenge at hand barely exceeding your skill level. You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So most of us want a really easy life, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We're gonna, The challenge with that is the lack of challenge with that. It's good to have something, we'll call it resistance. Sometimes I just call it contrast to soften it. Sometimes I just call it, really it's opportunity. But the way in which we view it is everything, right? So it's like, how does a Steph Curry become so great, or Michael Phelps or Michael Jordan? How did they become so great? If you listen to the stories, you'll hear it all there. Like the one thing that Doug Collins, Michael Jordan's, ex-basketball coach, would say about him, he's one of the most present people he ever met. When he was gambling and smoking and drinking, that's what he was doing.
Yep.
When he's playing basketball, that's what he's doing. And he does
Hmm.
them all well because he's so present. You see Steph Curry out there on the court, he's just having the most fun ever. In fact, his whole pregame routine, to a large extent, is about staying loose and staying in the moment, staying present. And because he knows what's coming up, it's going to be a challenging sort of night, no matter what night it is. So, to that end, to what you're saying, you're right. It's embracing the resistance is a great way to put it. Um, and you don't need to focus on the resistance.
Hmm.
Don't worry, that'll take care of itself. It's kind of like the whole thing about jumping off a cliff. Like, don't worry about down. Down will take care of itself,
Yes.
kind of thing, right? So the key is, and I took a motorcycle driving course that was really helpful in this way. I'd heard this story before by Tony Robbins, but to experience it was a different thing. I took a motorcycle driving course, and there's a wall. And when you're learning to drive a motorcycle, they always say, don't look at the wall. It's a big wall. And of course, going 30, 35, what happens when you look at the wall? Everybody hits the wall. They say, look to where you want to go, not to where you don't. And so, of course, when you look into the wall and you look away from what you don't want to hit or see, there's a little fear in that because you're like, I'm actively turning my other cheek. I'm actively turning away from something I should probably resist back. But as you turn away and you look into the corner, you clear the wall so easily. The wall's not a problem at all. So the key to your point is to recognize, accept there's going to be some speed bumps along the way. There are going to be some detours along the way, but you don't have to focus on them or obsess about them. You can focus on the opportunity that exists at hand and the things that are controllable, and be surprised that not only is your journey that much more enjoyable, it's also that much more successful.
The mind is a beautiful thing, and I think you articulated that point so well. The mind, so like with music, I work with my students, not just the physical aspect of playing the piano, but also the mental. We take time mentally away from the piano to just like I could just sit here and I visualize what I want to execute. If something I can't practice, it's not coming out through the hours of physically trying to practice a specific passage. If I'm not getting it, but I know how I want to make those changes, if I do it mentally first and I keep seeing myself, I see the keys. I think about I need to, be more relaxed here because that's going to give freedom of movement or something like that. And if I keep seeing that over and over again and I rest, it's a resting point too physically. But when I go back to the piano, sometimes it just kind of solves itself. It's the mental aspect of it. It's very interesting.
That is fascinating to me, not surprising at all, but very impressive and inspiring, right? There's a book I reread recently called The Expectation Effect by David Robson, and it's hundreds of studies he shares in the book about particularly and specifically that. They might even use a piano example. I know they use a basketball example,
Hmm.
but the idea is that you can improve performance in anything and skill in anything and even muscle tone simply by visualizing or imagining performing the activity or lifting the weight. It's fascinating. So, and it's really impressive to me that you can do that, Harrison. As a kid, that was part of my trouble, but of course it was, right? That to a large extent, as the Course in Miracles says, we're all much too tolerant of mind wandering, and we accomplish so little because of undisciplined minds. So
I
your
like that.
ability to focus in that way, to visualize in that way, is a testament to your discipline, but also to the effort that you've put in and day out. Sure, playing the piano, sure, but you're able to play the piano the way you can because you've been able to discipline the mind in the way that you have.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah, no, I think to achieve at a high level, you have to, it's not just the physical aspect, mental is huge. You are training another muscle in a way. You have to really have those repetitions and have the discipline. I think some of the key takeaways that I'm getting from our conversation is yes, discipline and then presence in whatever you are pursuing. Being present at what is at hand. Do you think I'm getting that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. I'd say that success is happiness, and happiness is presence, and presence requires discipline, right? Another way, sometimes I swap out the word discipline with discipline because I'm a big
Discipline.
fan of enjoying whatever it is that you're doing. So
Right.
we can enjoy everything and everybody more, I promise. So the idea is like if you're going to play the piano, for instance, sure, there are days you don't want to be there, I'm sure. You'd rather be out drinking, sleeping, anything else,
Hmm.
and you're there. So the idea is, okay, what can I do at the very least to not make my pain more painful? And one easy answer is don't complain to yourself or others about it. Just do it, right? Um, that discipline, that sort of commitment to not make my pain more painful, to enjoy this activity, whatever it is, as much as I possibly can by staying out of my head and in my body about it, is presence. That presence is happiness. And that happiness not only is success, it's also the parent to all other kinds of success. It's also births all kinds of other success. So yes, that's precisely right. You want to be disciplined about your presence, and you want to be, sort of present when you're disciplining yourself.
So, one, this is great advice. So, thank you for this. But you've had this career of you're highly well educated, and then you pursued happiness, and you've come to these conclusions of the steps that we can take. But then there's this whole other field, this whole other side that you're like this media personality. I mean, I'm curious, how did you get into that field specifically?
I still don't know exactly, Harrison. I mean, I still don't know. I mean, so I'll share the way it happened, and then we'll see if we can't tease anything out. I mean, when I was a kid, I was voted most shy in my high school class. I mean, I didn't speak till probably 12 or 13 really much at all, only
Wow.
to answer a question in class, really. And then I got to college and I realized that I liked girls and I would need to talk. Kind of was so I put myself on this like social training program and I got better at it. And then one day I was living in Philadelphia and I'm working a consulting job and I just hated my life and I was miserable. And I saw a show called Wild on E. It was like Brooke Burke, she's a swimsuit, model, and she traveled the world like interviewing locals. And I saw they had, she went to all these places like Miami and LA and Bali, whatever. And I saw one on Miami and I thought, oh, I want to go there. Like I want to move there. I want to live that life. Everybody's just rollerblading all day and on the beach all day and nobody has a job. It sounds kind of awesome. So, after, trying a number of things, I eventually was able to move to Miami. I'm going to business school and I'm walking along Lincoln Road. And at this point, I had, left the consulting company I was working for and I needed money, and I couldn't find a corporate job. I didn't want a corporate job, but I also couldn't find one. So I'm walking along Lincoln Road and this guy just stopped me and he said, hey, you ever modeled before? And I'm like, I first thought for sure he's like going to rob me. I was like checking my pockets. Like, is he just, Ashby Clinton was going to pop out.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, no, no, and I was polite to him, but I just thought I don't know what that was about. It happened a week later when I needed even more money, and by somebody else. So I said, you know what, I'm going to try this modeling thing, and if I can fool them for a week or two and make enough to pay the rent, and I'll figure out next month's rent after that once they drop me from the modeling agency kind of thing. It turned into like a 10-year sort of career. And in that career, I did some modeling and I did some acting. And I booked a show on CW, like in the most random way. I had no real interest in being an actor. And the audition, I didn't really care. I just wanted to get back to the pool. I knew I wasn't going to book it, and yet I did. And so, right, kind of weird stuff like this would happen. So in the meantime, I'm writing, I've gone through the suicidal experience. I've gone back to Penn for graduate school, the Master's in Applied Positive Psychology program. I'm writing a book. And uh, before long, people started to ask questions like, you're here at this modeling shoot or whatever, but you seem more excited to be in the trailer talking to people about happiness. Like, what do you want to do with your life? And it just kept dawning on me, like, I want to just talk about this happiness stuff. And then, because I was already in the entertainment field, it was kind of an easy transition. People would say, "Oh, I know somebody over here," or someone would call and say, "Oh, we can have this guy on the show. He knows a little something about being on TV. He won't be too awkward, hopefully." And so just one thing turned into the next and to the next. I didn't plot or plan or script any of it, Harrison. Like, and if I had, I couldn't have done even a fraction as good a job at, making it happen. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, with that or with any of my career. I don't think ever. And even when I've had sort of like well-laid plans, they didn't get executed against or come to fruition the way I'd ever imagined. Just through a number of serendipitous experiences did, one show happen, and then another show happened, and then another show happened, and I thought this is pretty interesting. And then, of course, then nothing happens for a while, and so yeah, it's a great question. I can't really tell you why, except that I know that I have a true heart around this, and I think maybe sometimes, occasionally, people feel that and they want to participate in it, maybe.
What have been some of the positive responses you've had over, the many years of pursuing this happiness journey? What have you seen from others who have been receptive to your message?
Oh, Harrison, that gives me shivers because that's humbling. Like on more than one occasion, I remember one specific occasion. I was doing a morning show out in LA. It was a passion project. Good Morning LaLa Land. We'd interview people that had inspiring stories, and it was a work in process. And so I bought a lot of clothes for that show because I don't want to wear the same thing more than once. So I'm going to like the Beverly Center right across from the studio, and I'm coming out of there one day, and this gentleman stops me and says, "Hey, hey, sir." I'm like, "Yeah, me?" He's like, "Yeah, you. I like the outfit, man. I like the outfit." I said, "Oh, thanks so much." He said, what do you do? What do you do for a living?" I said, "Oh, I do this little show over here, but I really work in positive psychology." And he said, we started having this conversation. And he said, "Why do I do it?" And I shared the suicidal experience I had had. And then about, I don't know, 5 minutes in the conversation, I feel to my right a heaviness and a presence that I hadn't really recognized in that moment. I was so in this conversation. And all of a sudden I turned and it was this guy's son and he was crying. And so at first I thought, and I said to him, "Oh my goodness, brother, I'm so sorry. Did I say something to hurt your feelings or to upset you? Because that was not my intention." And he's like, "No, Rob, you don't know. Today was the day." I'm like, "Today was the day for what?" "Today is the day I was going to kill myself today." And
Wow.
I'm like, and his dad looks at him shocked, like, "Son, what?" He's like, "Yeah, today was the day." And I'm like, "And now how you feeling about it? How you feeling about it? There's no judgment here, brother. You can share whatever you want to share." And he says, "I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it, Rob. I mean, if you can feel what you feel now and have the life that you have now, despite what you thought before, what you felt before, then I know I can do it." And I'm like, "Darn right, brother. You can do so much more than me, you know?" So that for me is one of those pivotal moments when you recognize and realize that it matters. And it's not about me at all. It's not about me because in that moment, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to self-promote. And I just was sharing authentically. And he picked up something on his own in that moment and experience that I just happened to be a tiny little pawn piece in. And we all have a story. Each one of us, we've all been through stuff, every one of us. And you don't know how sharing your story can change the world. It can change a friend, it can change an enemy, it can change a lover, it can change everything and everyone. You don't know, and you don't always get to see it. I was lucky enough in that moment to actually see the ripple effect, but usually you don't see it. The ripple effect is so far down the shore, you can't see it. And so for me, it's that experience and experiences like that one that make the work worthwhile, but also continue to humble me about the mysterious ways in which the universe works.
It's a very mysterious world, and we're along for this wonderful ride. And just having that positive frame of mind can make it even that much better. And I think that's what you're telling the audience and myself. And I'm excited to, you know, try, to kind of look through life with a different lens and just wake up every day grateful for all the great blessings I have. And yeah, it's just an exciting life pursuit that maybe I haven't journeyed on. And I hope from, the listeners listening to you that they take these little steps, that we breathe, we are more present, and, like I said, embrace the resistance or the contrast, to soften it. I think these are all really good tools that can help us along this pursuit of happiness. So if people want to get in touch with you or read your books or just hear more about you, where can they reach you?
Hopefully at one of your concerts or anywhere you're playing. Intent. Also, you can find me at my website at Coach Rob Mack. That's CoachRobMack.com. You can find me also on most social media platforms, probably most consistently on Instagram at Rob Mack Official. And you can find both of my published books and the other unpublished books, soon to be published books, everywhere great books are sold, including Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Fantastic. And I will make sure that all the links are in the episode description so that everyone can read and hear about all the great things that you're doing. Because this is super inspiring to me. And I'm just very blessed and thankful that you're willing to join me today. I really do appreciate your time.
Oh, the feeling is so deeply mutual, Harrison. It means the world to me. I know that part of the reason I was so depressed was because I couldn't not only listen to conversations like this, but have conversations like this with people like you who take a genuine interest and are present and engaged in the conversation, ask great questions, and have great insights and feedback. So thank you for inviting me into the conversation. Thank you for the work that you do. Please keep doing it, and know that I just find it a pleasure and privilege to even know you.
Oh, that means a lot. Thank you so much for saying that. Well, we are coming towards the end of our podcast, and what I do at the end is to give a little insight into our guests. We do a 1-minute rapid fire round of questions. So let me pull up my questions, and I'll get my timer here on my phone. Okay. Are you ready for this?
No, but let's go.
Okay, here we go. What are you, a morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
What's one book you recommend to everyone?
Happiness from the Inside Out.
There we go. What's the most underrated happiness habit?
Not thinking.
Favorite city you've ever visited?
Miami Beach.
Coffee, tea, or something else?
Coffee.
Would you love to have dinner with, who would you love to have dinner with, a living or historical figure?
Joel Goldsmith, author.
A word you try to live by every day?
Peace.
What's your go-to way to relax?
Lifting.
Lifting. Okay, great. One thing people would be surprised to learn about you?
I hit an alligator and I was kidnapped once.
That opens a whole new question. Okay.
That's too, yeah.
What is one app you can't live without?
Oof. Maybe a Course in Miracles app.
And what's one song that always lifts your mood?
Emotions by Mariah Carey.
Hey, that's a good one. And there's our 1 minute.
Wow, great questions, Harrison. I love those questions. I'm always so scared. I'm like, what are the questions going to be?
Yeah.
I'm going to answer them. I can answer those ones.
Well, some people are like, well, you should just spend the entire hour just rapid fire questions, and then we'd really get to know the person. So
that's true. Although I'm afraid that our attention muscles would atrophy. So it's good that you do them in here for now.
Oh, that's true. Well, Robert Mack, this has been an absolute pleasure. Please stay in touch. I'm just going to follow everything that you're doing, and just thank you again for just being an awesome person. You're bringing happiness to the world. So I appreciate you.
Takes one to know one. Thank you for having me. Come down to Miami soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Sheckler Spotlight with your host, Harrison Sheckler. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the show with a friend. New conversations drop regularly, so stay tuned. And thanks again for listening and being a part of the journey. Follow Harrison Sheckler on social media and visit harrisonsheckler.com to learn more.